Hello, everyone. My name is David. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I am feeling lately and why I'm making this video, and share my current thoughts and where I am at in life. I'm 44 years old, and lately I feel pretty lonely and melancholy. My life has not turned out how I had planned. I've been struggling more and more with coming to terms, more so than I have usually in the past few months. Generally, my life feels pretty pointless and meaningless. Recently, I've revived an old iPod, which this is what I understand to be a fifth generation iPod video, which would have released somewhere around 2005, 2006 or so. Originally, it came with a little hard drive in the back of it. I've replaced that with an iFlash Solo adapter board that plugs into, I guess, the little SATA connection and adapts into it an SD card. I've never had an iPod before. They came out at a time when I was mostly listening to digital music, and I had been doing that really since the mid or late 90s, just listening to MP3s on a computer. And prior to that, I really used Walkmans or Discmans. So, I just wanted to make this video to get some things I had been feeling off my chest and sort of speak here on the internet into the digital void. Over the past few months, especially, and probably more generally over the past year or so, I've just started to feel older. And a lot more like I'm just going through the motions in life, especially in work. Work's been more stressful over the past 6 to 12 months, and there's been a number of organizational changes in the company that I work for. And despite being one of the more experienced workers, especially in my department, I'm probably the most experienced. I've felt increasingly overlooked and taken for granted. And generally just having these kind of feelings have led me to reflect more on life, where I've been over the past 15 or 20 years, where I've come from, kind of childhood, upbringing, and adolescence, and maybe where I might be going, continuing on this kind of a path, especially what it's been like over the past year or so. And these kind of reflections here more recently have kind of brought about a strong sense of nostalgia for the past and just kind of general feelings of emptiness. Kind of realizing I have not progressed as far in life as I had hoped to at this point. At currently 44 now, but 5 or 6 months away from being 45. I had pictured that as kind of a touch point, age 45, and being further along. in my own life by the time I had reached 45, and here I am on essentially the doorstep of it, and I feel like I've hit these roadblocks, and I've had a number of life plans that have just kind of fallen apart. And honestly, this feeling of being stuck and overlooked is, I haven't really felt it before. Even when I was younger and less experienced, I never really felt just stuck in life and overlooked. I could at least overcome things, move forward, but especially the past year, I've just felt like I've been going backwards. And I kind of realized, from really my early 20s onward, I've kind of focused heavily on working, on personal improvement. And I haven't spent a whole lot of time really even acknowledging how I feel or bothering to care. I'm just so focused on trying to move forward and get ahead that it's all kind of an afterthought. And especially for me, the past 6 years have, in particular, really been a tumultuous and taxing period of time in my life, from really my late 30s, 38, 39, especially into about 41, 42. I've gone through a divorce and some significant changes at work and just personal routine kind of stuff because of the tangential divorce fallout. And then the work changes, that my own personal routine was just completely upended and impacted. So, and all that played out over the course of the past 5 or 6 years now. I've just been, especially over the past week or so, week and a half, really thinking about how I've just been so busy and so exhausted with all of this stuff going on, just trying to get through the day, the week, the month, get through a work project, get from start of the year to middle of the year to end of the year, get from this project to the next project that, I went from 2018 to now 2024, and over half a decade has essentially slipped away from me. So I'll get my mic up here so maybe I sound a little bit better. We'll do a jump cut here. Here is the hard drive that was pulled from the iPod. Tiny little thing, really. Fits in my hand. And you can see how it compares up against the iPod. Well, spinning mechanical hard drive out of an iPod, kind of crazy. That people used to carry around. We used with them to listen to music on. Kind of wild. So, anyway, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. That would have been my childhood, early adolescence, and teenage years throughout the 90s. And a large part of that time during the 80s and 90s, I kind of eventually started to fill with video games, especially the original Nintendo and then the Super Nintendo. And recently I've been going back to, as I had mentioned, kind of these, this sense and this feeling of nostalgia. I've I've tried to recollect my childhood and recreate some of the experiences I had then through old gaming experiences on the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, especially other gaming consoles too. Like I was really big into the original PlayStation and to some degree the Nintendo 64, but especially games like the original Legend of Zelda, Destiny of an Emperor, the original Dragon Warrior games, which really Dragon Quest, but initially in the West they were, I guess for copyright purposes or whatever reason, they were Dragon Warrior was the copyright. Then Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger are all games that really stuck out in my early childhood and then teenage years, like 94, 95, 93 maybe, playing Final Fantasy 2 and 3 in North America and Chrono Trigger. I have these really vivid memories of Christmas, a Christmas in the 1980s, later 1980s, and getting the original Super Nintendo entertainment system, and with it Mario and Duck Hunt, and sitting on the floor in the living room and playing Mario and Duck Hunt for hours and hours on end, shooting ducks and the clay pigeons with the NES Zapper. And then it was sometime that same year later on, I think, that we had gotten the original Legend of Zelda in the cartridge that was the gold coated cartridge. And I remember sitting on the floor on a sleeping bag playing the original Zelda on an old CRT TV wrapped in a blanket, well past midnight for multiple days in a row. I think probably in the holiday time off from school, I think. I remember actually going to the mall and purchasing the original Final Fantasy from a video game kiosk in the mall. And in the ride back home, in the back of the car, sitting there, reading the original Final Fantasy game manual on the car ride home. And I remember it was like Fax Xanadu or Faz Xanadu, the Xanadu game. I think it originally came out on the computer, but had a Nintendo port. And also Destiny of an Emperor. I remember going to Toys R Us with my family, and I can still picture in my mind standing in the video game aisle of Toys R Us, and they had these, in the aisles, they had like these little plastic things hanging on the shelves with cards in them, with the price of the game and the name of the game, and like the box art was there, and you would take the little cards out. So I took one for the Xanadu game and a card for Destiny of an Emperor. You took them back up to the cash register, and the store employee would go in the back in a room and get copies of the game and then bring them up and ring them up for you. And especially for those games, I can hear the video game music, especially for like Destiny of an Emperor. Just thinking about the game. I played Destiny of an Emperor, I think. dozens of times. Or not only when I was a kid, but continually throughout the years, I've played Destiny of an Emperor over and over and over again. So I can hear the game music in my mind. So, you know, um, kind of thinking about these nostalgic things and these games, reminiscing of them, and about other aspects of my childhood and growing up. Uh, I also thought about other things I'd kind of done over the course of my childhood, which a large part of it was going back to the iPod, but obviously not about the iPod itself, but just music in general was a really, really large part of my childhood. Whenever we were outside playing in the yard or riding bikes around the neighborhood, we always had some kind of music, and it was usually like a Discman or a Walkman or a boom box of some kind. And we always had, a tape playing or a radio station on playing something. The song I always heard on the radio a lot was, I think it's Lean on Me, Somebody to Lean On. Club Nuevo would always seem to be on the radio. And, just thinking back about growing up in the 80s and 90s, my first experience with really being online was not so much the internet, because the internet really wasn't, at least publicly available where I was at until like 1993, I think, was the first time when we actually had internet service. And that was through a dial-up modem. But prior to having direct internet access at home through a service, we had older computers, either an IBM XT, and then later on a 286 and a 386, and then a 486. And through those, we had dial-up modems. With the dial-up modems, we just dial into local bulletin board systems, or BBSs, and they were just in the local area code, because at the time, making any kind of long-distance phone call, and long distance usually just meant dialing outside of the local area code, which kind of by today's standards is unheard of, I think. I have retained on my own phone that I have right now, which is a cell phone, an area code for another state, a different state from which I live in right now. I just call anywhere without any thought to, where any area code is based. But back in the 80s and 90s, we were only dialing into bulletin board systems in the local area code. And sometimes the BBS you would dial into would have access to Usenet groups. So you get a look at what people were posting on Usenet groups, and you can download stuff. And there was like a rudimentary connection to email, what you could do and stuff to kind of by proxy through the BBSs. I remember my first email address was actually a Juno email address, I think. And then later on, Hotmail and whatever email address your local ISP would give you too at that point. And so it's kind of crazy to think back on the evolution of that stuff from the 80s and 90s up into now, and going from like dial-up into I moved on to DSL and then cable. And then today I just have fiber internet connection, which is like $70 a month for gigabit access to all these services now you can find on the internet. And anyway, I've just kind of taken some kind of comfort or solace out of kind of going down my own sort of memory lane here, and just thinking about how all of these kind of changes over the past 3 or 4 decades are just kind of highlighted as these different milestones or touch points in my life. And I'm now at a point where I'm like in this always connected world where I've got this cell phone, where I've got email and internet access and video and voice and texting. Literally anywhere I go at any time, I've got notifications from YouTube, Reddit, email notifications from work, personal email notifications, texting notifications, whatever kind of push verification and MFA verification and all this stuff that is just in this ever-present black mirror screen that you're constantly carrying around with you everywhere, that most people, wherever you go, are staring right at this screen. And it all seems kind of like insanity to look around. You know, like, it's like bridging. It's literally time travel, right? I've traveled through time, obviously taking the slow route of just growing older 1 second at a time for 44 years, but time traveling from my birth in the 80s up into today, and watching all of these technological changes from a phone, a rotary phone that my family had, to wireless phones, car phones, cell phones, just all this stuff, to this point where I feel completely disconnected from any kind of what normal life used to be, of talking to people in reality, going over to friends' houses, to just, nobody talks to me anymore. I don't talk to anyone. If I try to call someone, they don't answer the phone. They text me back and ask me, why did I call them? Why are you calling? Well, pick up the phone. I'm calling so you pick up the phone. What do you need? I need you to pick up the phone so we can talk. So it's I don't know. It's strange to kind of think back in your mind how much life has changed over time. I just feel disconnected. And these days, I'm just always busy with all of these other things that don't feel like they're really any part of me. I'm not connected to any of these things. These are just all kinds of things and systems that have grown up around me, to the point where I've become overgrown with how life has changed, and I'm not me anymore. Life isn't normal anymore. And I've been so busy over the years to even recognize the small incremental changes over time that have grown into this big, massive change that it is today. And it just feels like not only in my personal life, but in work, dealing with people, they just want something from me. They want more from me. I have to produce more. And nobody and nothing cares about me as like an actual person in reality. I'm just an input or an output, some kind of a conduit for a means to an end. Nothing's really about me or who I am. I just personally feel like I am an afterthought to people. If I'm thought of at all, I'm just sort of caught up in the machine. I'm just another cog in the machine caught up in whatever hell this is that life has kind of turned into. All right. So, kind of with all this focus and thought on nostalgia, video games, and how I spent a lot of my time in my childhood and adolescent and teenage years growing up, kind of listening to music and playing video games and stuff, that led me kind of down this whole path of trying to find something that I could listen to music on. And that eventually just led me to an iPod. Listening to music on a device hadn't really been something I had done since, like a standalone dedicated device had not been something I had done since the late 90s or early 2000s. And at that time, it still literally would have been a Discman, a Sony Discman. So I just wanted to find something I could play music again on and get away from this sort of convergence that I have kind of developed a distaste for anymore. The convergence of everything being on your cell phone that you carry around with you everywhere, and your cell phone is just this one-stop shop for literally everything you do anymore. Notifications, email, communicating to people, the internet, it's all there. So I want something to disconnect from that a little bit, and kind of ended up with an old iPod I found at a thrift store, and found through looking around at Reddit and other sources that you could just swap out the hard drive with a SD card and replace the battery, and also use third-party software, Rockbox, rather than iTunes, and kind of break out of the Apple system, which iTunes is okay, but I found trying to load a personal library into iTunes, the ID3 tags and stuff, and the album art would not always quite work right for whatever reason in iTunes. So that's ultimately why I threw Rockbox on the player, and then Rockbox seems to load up all MP3 files fine, using the daily build and all the album art and everything. So I kind of ended up with this refurbished iPod device with an SD card, a new battery, and then Rockbox, and playing a music library on it. And that sort of satisfied my requirements of just getting a dedicated device, not attached to the ever-present cell phones, so I could just kind of walk around the house or go to work and listen to music or podcasts or whatever, and not additionally be interrupted or tied to notifications on a cell phone, and not be tied to a streaming service or anything like that either. So it's been kind of nice having a standalone music device, not only for nostalgia purposes, but just as a way to disconnect from the whole cell phone ecosystem thing, smartphone. And it's been kind of, kind of cathartic to rediscover like a standalone music device, and have a music device more advanced than anything really I had ever owned before. Because I kind of gave up at Walkmans or Discmans. And I had, used a cell phone over the years or whatever to listen to like Pandora or Spotify or Amazon Music or Google Music or whatever, but I just hate having the cell phone tied to everything. This, you can just have the iPod. Just have the iPod with some headphones and your own personal music on an SD card, your library, no interruptions, no notifications, and you can just enjoy the music. So it's been kind of my own personal therapy to have a disconnected device where I can just kind of endlessly slip away into my own little world and listen to music on my own without any distractions. It's kind of like a refurbished iPod for me has kind of been like a Goldilocks kind of device. It's not so old and tedious that I'm dealing with like trying to burn CDs or make a mixtape. It's not so modern. It's got a bunch of notifications, or you have to be subscribed to a streaming service, or you have to be connected to the internet. It's just a standalone device with my own music, with album art and ID3 tags, and I just listen to music and enjoy it. So, for me, like the iPod thing has been an additional bit of nostalgia in restoring this iPod device, reviving an old device, and giving me kind of a way to reconnect with like a part of myself from the past. And it's kind of given me this inner sense of like solace or peace from all these overwhelming kind of distractions that come along with sort of this modern way of life and smartphones and ever-present screens and notifications and always connected. It's just given me this manifestation of nostalgia. It was kind of like a lifesaver or a life raft connection to the past, if that makes any kind of a sense. And, kind of sitting here thinking about my own life over time, from my childhood up to now, and like these feelings of nostalgia I've been having, it also got me reflecting on YouTube. So kind of thinking about video games from my past and music from my past and my past and childhood in general, and then restoring this iPod also got me to thinking about like my first experience with YouTube. And for me, that would have been either really late 2005 and then early into 2006, which is, kind of ties in with like the same time period as at least particular versions of iPods. There were earlier versions of iPods, but the video one would have been around the same time as like the birth of YouTube. And I remember, I remember YouTube initially was just like really small clips, like 30 seconds or a minute, and then they went up to like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. It was just this really basic, rudimentary kind of a platform. And initially, people on YouTube were just using really basic webcams to just talk about their day or do a really basic video. It's like the first video ever uploaded to YouTube was like my day at the zoo or a day at the zoo or something weird like that. I remember some of the early videos that stood out to me were just like normal people talking about what they did that day, or like a small part of their day, or a book they read, or a thing they collected, or a song they listened to. And kind of as I get older here and I look back at my own life, it's just striking how so much stuff has changed, and the kind of different technologies and time periods I've lived through, and kind of the significant shifts in the technology itself. Going from, I can still remember, like my parents and family had 8-track players in their cars. And then we had tape players and CD players, and then like the iPod and stuff, these really sweeping changes in technology, but then also in culture in general. I remember growing up and in the neighborhood, there are always kids around. There are always kids from other kids in the neighborhood for me to play with. We were kids in the neighborhood. We're always, riding bikes together or playing baseball or basketball or football, or we're always doing something with neighborhood kids. And the culture has changed so much now. I don't even see kids at the park anymore. And then also like how platforms like YouTube itself has changed so much over time in a fairly short span of time, really. I mean, YouTube isn't even 20 at this point, really. It's like next year or the year after, YouTube will actually be like 20. So, thinking back about platforms like YouTube, I remember watching original videos, people just talking about themselves, and I wanted to be part of that. And so much time has just slipped away, and I've never done it. I've never just really participated as myself with just like a personal story or a personal video about myself. So, I mean, part of this video now is just me talking in general about myself and about whatever it is I'm feeling, and putting it out there on YouTube. As I get older and reflect, now, today, I wish I had spent more time creating these videos or like these digital artifacts to leave on YouTube or elsewhere, just of myself, to review of myself and see my own growth and changes over time, and potentially interact with others on the same platform. I really wish, here I am 44 years old, wishing I had made some old YouTube videos in, 2006 and onward and left them there. To have just seen what I was like then, to have had it there, and to have been able to have gone back and reviewed my change over time. Personally, I think YouTube as a platform has had a really significant and profound impact on my own life. Thinking about how would I have gathered information prior to YouTube, but also prior to wikis or Wikipedia itself or the internet itself. I would have been in a library or looking at some kind of encyclopedia or something like that to try and extract information. But I've really benefited greatly from stuff like, well, it's not perfect, Wikipedia and Reddit and YouTube and other similar platforms where you have so much access to information and so many different sources on those platforms. Like, if I want to learn a new cooking recipe, I can watch 10 different videos on how to do something and find a method that works for me, or find the best overall method, or whatever. I've learned so many things about all kinds of topics. Reading, writing styles, cooking, car repair, all kinds of topics, philosophy, whatever, all on YouTube and Reddit and other platforms, and just sort of crowdsourcing all this different information from the people that share information on these platforms. And it's really just been an amazing, wonderful resource, the internet in general and the platforms on the internet, and all these wonderful things and different perspectives that are mostly freely available. So I've just kind of been sitting around thinking about all this different stuff. And this video is just sort of my late incursion into a platform personally that I've been utilizing for close to 20 years now. And generally, this is just a little bit about what I've been thinking and feeling. I've tried to put some of my current thoughts down on this video and hopefully explain to some degree my motivation for making this video. There's a whole bunch of other stuff I could go into, but I want to try and keep this video at least to this much subject matter, and maybe make an additional video later on and kind of go from there. Because really, at this point, I think I've rambled on much longer than I ever expected at this point. So hopefully this video has been at least somewhat coherent and not too painful to experience. All right, I'll close with that. If anyone happens to be out there listening, I would be interested in hearing from you. Have you had similar experiences or thoughts, or do I just sound like a crazy lunatic? Thanks for watching and listening. Take care.